that means a lot. That means he's taking into account our being, our frailty, our fleshliness. He's taking into account our cognitive ability and what we don't have any control over. He's taking all of that into account, and then he is making a plan. Okay, so now how would I have my people to live on this earth? Not in some utopia place, some, that's coming later. What kind of a plan do I give to my people to live with sin, general sin, and personal sin in this world? What kind of a plan do I give them? And that's what he gave at Mount Sinai. He said that, okay, here's the commandments. We're going to start there. And then he's going to reveal after that all the judgments for those that would break any of those commandments. And then he's going to go on from that, and he is going to detail, and I mean detail, everything from what kind of curtains to hang in the temple, right? And what? What to do with your neighbor if his ox comes and kills one of your cows? Whatever. And he just, talk about detail. Now, he gives them all this, and in place he puts together, he understands, of course, that they're what, a couple million strong, right? Something like that. And how do you organize 2 million people with sin? We had a breakfast yesterday. I was talking to one of the guys, and he was talking about a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, who had taken on a pastoral position. And he asked if I had ever considered that. I said, I've considered it. And I said, that's not a part for me. I can teach and I can preach, but I can't pastor. Because I don't like herding cats. And it'll show up in my heart. You need a special demeanor, if you would. There's a special man that's called to be a pastor, because he has to preach, he has to teach, but he also has to be a pastor, a shepherd, right? Now I just assume shoot the sheep is whatever's in the way. That's not a pastor's work. That's something else. Anyway, that's not that you can't get there, but I just knew that wasn't where it was called. But I talked to him about this friend, and he had taken on this position of herding cats. Well, Moses had that spot. And God had the bigger spot. How do you herd these cats? They're sort of disinterested in what you have to say. They're not really paying attention. They don't really care. They don't really know what the problem is. Isn't that a cat? They know they don't need you. They think.
They're entitled to absolutely everything.
They are entitled to they call us sheep, but I think, cat works a bit. Anyway, so God knows all this stuff, and so he sets in place an organization, and he describes it using judges. You don't need a lawmaker. That's me, God says. So you don't need the Senate. You don't need the lawmakers of the land, because I've made that. I've done that piece. Sorry, I have my other vision there.
No.
All right, for all our
Right on the edge.
all our TV viewers. So, but God says, I'm going to fill that part. I am your king, and I'm your senate. You don't need a Congress to debate all sorts of things and then come up with the answer on that. I'm going to give you the law. In fact, I'm going to give you the law. I'm also going to give you the judgments. It's done for you. So if somebody breaks the law, this is what you do with them. So all I need you guys to do, God says, is I need good judges. Honest men who fear me and will do what the law says to do. Base their judgments on my written law. And so I just need judges. And that's how I'd like you to live. This is his plan. And bringing up that word plan deliberately because along the way, we've talked a lot about how God had to change plans. Didn't change his purpose. Because his purpose in all of that, promised land and all that, was of course the Messiah, which we just celebrated his birth. Same deal, all the way through. But his plan was judges, and they said, we want to be like all the other nations. And Samuel's kids sort of were instrumental because they weren't very good judges, as you recall. And so the nation said, well, we don't want your sons. Look at them, they're pathetic. And we would like kings like everybody else. So they rejected God's plan, not based on God, but based on men's, misapplying of it, or failing in it. And so they said, we want kings. And God said, well, you're not going to like that. And they said, we want it anyway. So he says, okay, now we're going to, and there was a shift that happened. There was a change of plan. And he said, I'm going to give you kings, but understand the kind of king that you're going to get. He's going to take, he's going to take, and he's going to take, and take, and take, and take, and take. That's what you get. Now, by the way, I've made up my mind now. We're changing plans. We're not going to go back to the judges thing. So I've changed plans. Now we're going to work out my purpose with the kings. And he chose, God did, Saul. And God was about to give Saul that promise that on the throne there would never be a descendant of Saul's. But Saul's heart wasn't with God. And so God rejected him. And then he looked and found David, of course. And David's heart, they're both sinners, right? Saul, David, both sinners. In fact, as I pointed out way back, you can find more error in David's life than you can specific in at least the extremity with Saul. Both sinners. But the heart of David went towards God. He knew that even though he had sinned, God was right, his law was right, any punishment was right, all that. Saul, not so much. But David was given that promise. And then he made a covenant with David. And this covenant was the kind that said, you will always have a son, a bloodline on the throne, right to the Messiah, forever. And if your son commits iniquity, I will not hold it against him. Now, if not for that covenant, you and I don't get to heaven. Because it's on the basis of that kind of a covenant that he made with David, that he would take care of the iniquity of the seed, right, that would come. It wasn't going to be because of his goodness now. Solomon did good for 20 years and then he went off the rails the last 20. I was looking at, and this is an amazing thing, how can you end badly and still get to heaven? How can you end badly and still get to heaven? Now, I'm sure we're all planning on ending good, ending well. But God made it so that even if you end badly, you're going to be with me. How is that possible? Because in a covenant, the person who offers that covenant has to fill in the gap of anything that's short of the other person that agreed to it. And that's what God did with his blood. And that covenant, that despite it all, and we have sinner after sinner after sinner after sinner showing up all through the kings. And of course, because of Solomon's sin, it broke into two nations in the northern kingdom, spiraled downward right from the beginning, because Jeroboam, right from the start, said, we're going to do this differently. I don't trust this thing that they're not going to go back to David. And so I'm going to make up my own religion. I'm going to mimic everything that they're supposed to do in the south, and I'm going to make my own religion. And that's what they did, and they just kept going on that downward spiral all the time. But it wasn't as if these guys didn't sin. There was great kings. There was never a good king in the north, but in the south there were good kings. But there was also bad kings. There was also good kings who did bad things. And God said that covenant is going to carry you through all the way.
And of course, we got to a place where God said, okay, that's enough of the northern kingdom, I'm just going to take them out of Syria. But the nation of Judah continued on for many years, 100 and some, 130 or so, or maybe more. And we came to Zedekiah in this time. But after, every time there was a king after King Josiah, it was an evil king, even in the south. And God, yes, go ahead.
How then, if the promise is that there will always be a descendant of David on the throne,
Yes.
where did that promise stay in the captivity years and all the years right till Jesus' day?
Well, okay, we won't spend the time now, but that's a good question. So if you're going to go into Matthew, you're going to see that genealogy pass through.
But they weren't on the throne.
Well, they weren't on the throne. You're saying that if there was a throne, it was a descendant of David. While there was a throne, there was a descendant of David. The next time there's a throne, it's God's kingdom.
Okay, that
So,
gives it a slightly different twist.
It does. It gives it a
But
little
the
twist.
promise does not
I don't think the
have
promise
to
was
say-
that there would always be a king to Israel.
Oh,
There was always going to be a descendant of David on the throne. We'll have to dig it deeper. But I think that's the way I look at
And
it.
both Mary and Joseph had
Yeah, they both had
royal
the
blood,
bloodline,
right?
of course,
They were
so-
both direct descendants, both lines.
We'll pick that up yet. At some future date, bring that up.
So now we have a time when God looks at the thing that he has done,
And he allowed the plan to change.
and in fact, he changed the plan again, because the plan was going to be with Saul, and he changed it to David. And now he says this thing is without remedy, somewhere around in here. Well, actually, yeah, just after Josiah. What thing? The king's thing. And he's going to now change plans again, and he's going to say, now I'm going to let the Babylonians come in and take you guys, the south. And I'm going to change plans. I'm going to put you, and he's very specific, I'm going to put you into captivity for 70 years. And I'm going to, and now we're, so how did we get to Daniel? Because right in here, when Jehoiakim, who was Josiah's son, came into power, it had already got so bad that God allowed the Babylonians to come in and already take some of Judah captive, Daniel being in that mix that got taken captive. And he was taken to Babylon, Daniel was, along with his 3 friends. But the timeline wasn't done yet there, but once you move from this timeline and you follow it over to Daniel, that's where Daniel 1, chapter 1 picks up, and he begins his journey in Babylon. Who does? Daniel does. Corporately, we saw all this come, and now God changes that focus and brings it into Daniel, and we've been walking with Daniel. We are in the 70 years captivity when you're reading Daniel. Okay, there was a hand up here, so.
We deal different than we don't understand. You can say the whole how we think. We think in the now, and God
Yes.
deals in eternity, and that's also like I say some people don't understand when, or I say people don't understand eternity. They just don't know way they understand it because they also some people think that once you die you're just gone. Okay, well he made people the soul eternal, whatever it is. So. If you don't go to heaven, he's got something where you have to say something. That's why there has to be a hell. So that, because we don't understand the whole meaning of the eternity, it's a problem for the human race.
It is, it's a big one, which is what he came to solve. The biggest problem. Now, his purpose hasn't changed, but again, his plan has changed. He's moved them into captivity. He says he's going to leave them there for 7 years, then he's going to bring them back. A very obvious change of plan from what he had. And a very obvious change of plan from what it was when they were at Mount Sinai. Now, at this point I brought up many times, I'll just say it again. They were brought from Mount Sinai into the promised land. They were from that point. What were they supposed to become? They were supposed to become a city on a hill. That's what they were supposed to become. Why? So they look good? No. So that God looks good to all the nations around. Why? Just so that you go, wow, what a God. No, because unless they find the Messiah, they don't get saved. It's God's bottom line all the way through. You and I aren't supposed to look shiny good as Christians just so we look shiny good. You're supposed to look shiny good, if you would, so that people are drawn to the God that made you shiny good. And then they can hear about that Savior and get saved themselves. It's a very simple purpose. But it's profound, and there is nothing more important. And that's his purpose. And now this plan is not working out, so to speak, because of sinful man. And he's going to change it up. And we are now in Daniel. And this is what we've been sort of looking at. And with regard to Daniel, chapter 1, of course, when he arrives and he's groomed for the palace. And nobody knows of his gifting yet. In fact, I'm not even sure he does until it sort of hits him. That he's going to be this interpreter of dreams. But it comes to fruition pretty quickly. By chapter 2, of course, Daniel is the one that is drawn in to talk with Nebuchadnezzar. Now remember, when Nebuchadnezzar had that horrific dream, right, this statue that, you know, with the gold, the silver, the brass, and so forth, and then this rock cut out of the mountain without hands, and it shatters the feet, and it just, the whole thing just blows up into chaff. That terrified Nebuchadnezzar. That was the dream. But when he said, now that he called all the wise men, sorcerers and so forth, I want you to tell me what my dream was, and then I want you to tell me the interpretation. Daniel wasn't prominent yet enough in the palace structure to even be notified. He wasn't called in. So when he heard about it, was the first time, that was from the servant that was going around. He was going to gather everybody up to kill them, all the magicians, wise men. Then Daniel, of course, does his piece and steps in, and God intervenes in all of that. And by chapter 2, by the end of chapter 2, he's brought to prominence because he not only reveals the dream to Nebuchadnezzar and then gives him the interpretation. And now we have been spending time looking at that interpretation. But I want to pause a little bit again and remind you of the significance of what is going to occur. God had wanted the nation of Israel to be a city on a hill. That people would be drawn to him, Jesus, and to find the Messiah. They had failed miserably. Little spots, glimmers of light along the way, yes, but overall, miserable failure. And now, what happens here in the thing that nobody wants to have happen, an enemy comes in, annihilates the place, takes everybody captive. And now he's going to use a single man, Daniel, to do what he wanted to do with the nation. And all of a sudden you see by chapter 2 the brilliance of a city on a hill. Or a candle put up on the candlestand. And everybody is going, how could he have done that? How could he have known the dream without being told what the dream was? Who can do that? What kind of a God knows what your dream is and tells another man so that he can tell you? How does that? That's impossible. Yeah. Okay, we're getting close now, right? Now we're getting a pretty good idea of who Daniel's God is. He's bigger than anything they see. He's bigger than anything that any of the demon-worshipping sorcerers or magicians, all that stuff, all their witchcraft, everything that they could come up with, they did not have power like this. They couldn't, because God didn't allow it. Which God? Well, Daniel's God, the same one that allowed him to see what he could see. And now Daniel is, what happens to him? Boom. Right at the top, for who to see?
the nation of Israel? They don't even know what's going on. They don't even, Daniel doesn't even mention these guys. He's not like reminiscing, going, I wonder what's going on back home. You don't hear about it. He is God's vessel. The way He wants to use you and me, right where you are, to be filled by His Spirit with all the light that that gives, and with all the gifts that He has given you. Not your neighbor, not your spouse, not anybody else but you. And He wants to use you the way He used His vessel in Daniel. He just does. And you don't have to shine brilliantly for the whole Christian world to see. Well, that's no fun. My flesh says, right? Do you know that you could shine brilliantly your entire life, apparently 70 years plus, in a place where nobody knows what you're doing?
The foundation of a bridge underwater.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So Daniel he's just doing what God has given, and he's put in a place of prominence in Babylon. Now, I've read a little bit of Babylon in the past, and we're going to touch on that again, probably get there this morning as well. But this was no little empire. Okay? We're talking. Now, think again. Is it ironic? What's the right word? He wanted this nation to be the most brilliant, blazing nation on the planet, so that all would be like the Queen of Sheba and go, what is going on over there? And they didn't do it because of fleshly sin. But one man, Daniel, says somehow, I mean, we've read about his character already, but he's so committed to God that even if they change his masculinity, even if they change all the stuff that could have been with him, he is just committed to God. You don't hear about that. He's just focused on what would God have me do here, and I'm going to stay faithful to Him. In an absolute heathen surrounding, totally. I'm assuming that his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going, hey, right on. He's got some support for him, I guess.
This time was already after the manuscripts had been found and they were back in there. That if he was a student, he might have learned, like Joseph was previously,
He could have studied some of the good character of the past man.
how great God, powerful God is.
Not a reject, yeah. Absolutely.
But I'm sure that God revealed it to him also, whatever.
And I mean, it's just amazing. His character is amazing. But as I was saying, he's got a little bit of support group. But you know what happened when he got put in the place of prominence? What happens to all the other magicians, even though they kept their head on with their shoulders and stuff? That was good. But jealousy will come in very quickly, right? Envy, jealousy. Do you know what? Those guys all wanted to have that top spot. Don't you know it? Right? I mean, who doesn't want that top spot? This is your job, right? Well, you want the top spot, right? You want to be the most known. They would all love to have a chance to interpret that dream. But they knew they couldn't, right? But Daniel could. So now, he might have this little fan club with the three guys, but he's got enemies already. And of course, guess who his biggest enemy is? Satan. Does he have any sort of power there? Oh yeah. This isn't you living your Christian life in southern Manitoba in a Mennonite reserve. Okay? I don't know if we can get an equivalency here, but this is taking you out of your comfort zone and putting you in a place where there is no comfort around of the things that you're familiar with. And yet you are shining the way God intended the nation to shine. And doesn't it almost read as if he doesn't even realize it? Isn't that the prettiest character when somebody doesn't realize how nice they are? You know, it's opposite of, you know, the arrogant guy who knows how good he is. It doesn't come off quite the same. I don't read or hear, you know, the undercurrent. I don't see arrogance in the guy. He's just God's. Now there's so much in just in that already, just what we could apply to our own lives, right? So now let's move on into this a little bit further, and I want to bring something else up. So now, what is going on when we chronologically, this is how we arrived in Daniel. We've just walked along chronologically since Samuel, book of Samuel. We've been walking through, and now we are walking with God's people, but the focus, the camera, sort of went from, we've been walking with the kings, and also, now we're over here, and now we're going to look at Daniel. One man, and it just zooms in on this guy, and his three buddies. Right? And then we ask the question, early on, why would God reveal this dream to this man? Which man? To Nebuchadnezzar. And what do I mean by this dream? Look, I'm trying to get, I haven't been successful, I'm trying to get a comprehensive list of prophecies. Not, what you'll find quickly is a comprehensive list of prophecies fulfilled by Jesus Christ. I'm just looking for a comprehensive list of prophecies of the Old Testament. A lot of them, of course, either allude to or are specific to Christ, but not all. For instance, you can have a prophecy of like Jonah, right? He prophesies that Nineveh is going to fall, right? Or whatever, and it can be an immediate prophecy. There's some prophecies where they become fulfilled within 2 verses, right? This is prophesied, and then something comes to pass. It's all those prophecies I want to have a list of, but I'm pretty sure what I'm going to find is what I've already sort of determined. That nothing like this has ever happened in the human race before. Prophecy has happened. Much prophecy has happened, but in little itty-bitty bits, right? Crush your head kind of thing. Just little snippets. And now we arrive after all this time, and we come to a place where they are in captivity, and now a single man, Nebuchadnezzar, receives a dream of a prophecy that is going to be comprehensive, if you will, I'll use that word, from Daniel's time, Nebuchadnezzar's time, to the end of the age. Before you had blip, 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 blip. Now you've got from boom to boom. And he's going to, why give it to this guy? Remember we asked that question. Why in the world would you give it to Nebuchadnezzar? Why not give it right to Daniel? Well, God's efficient with what he does, right? When he gave it to Nebuchadnezzar, it freaked out Nebuchadnezzar, for one, right? But it also was like the background, the canvas for getting Daniel to be where God wanted him to be. And there's all sorts involved in that. He's going to be there for a while. Of course, Daniel will be in that place, even once the Babylonians get conquered by the Medes and Persians. He's still going to be in a place of prominence. God has worked all that out by giving the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, not to. You can do it however he wants, but this is how he did it. And remember that we spent some time too looking, because Daniel is going to see the same thing. Remember what did we look at? Chapter 8? Yeah. There was a vision that he had in chapter 2, Daniel had. So, and remember, I sort of laid out the first 6 chapters. The first 6 chapters of Daniel are chronological, so it sort of goes in time period. It just starts with, of course, the capture of them, and then it moves through time, just chronologically, until the Babylonians are conquered by the Medes and Persians, and Cyrus and Darius take over in there.
That's chronological, up to chapter 6. After that, chapter 7 and on in Daniel, it can be flashbacks or God just showing us a vision that Daniel had. But they're not necessarily in chronological order after that. They are stuck into different pieces that are within that 70 years captivity. But the first 6 chapters we're following along chronologically with Daniel in time. And now, in this place, God has given them this revelation of the future events of this world. From right then, I mean literally, from Nebuchadnezzar to the end of the age. Wow. Now, we've asked before, why? Why would God want to reveal that? Well, I think it's a fairly simple answer. We sort of talked about this, but look, Maggie and I mentioned this morning. This book is, one of its biggest essences, is a book of warning. Yes? Would you agree? He is warning us. Because we can't see it. There's a passage that I've been looking at, I'm looking a little side study on our blind spots, some of the blind spots that we have as human beings. And John, in the book of 1 John, actually, he's going to talk about how if you say you love God but hate your neighbor, you walk in darkness, right? He goes on with that. It's all this sort of convoluted speaking kind of thing, but he goes for a while in there. But what he says it is because that you are now walking because in blindly, because that the darkness has blinded you. Not the hating your brother. Watch this. The hating your brother caused the blindness, now you're walking in blindness. That means now when you relate to your brother, that's not right, but also when you're relating to other stuff, you're sort of walking in blindness. And you're not making right decisions. The hating your brother caused it. And now you have consequences. John writes about it as having consequences now. You're walking in blindness. So you walk into stuff. You trip. Now, the way to clean it up is go back and clean up clean up what caused it. But you're walking in it right now, and it's just the consequence continue. Well, God knew that with sin, Adam, Eve, right? Where are you guys? Why'd you run and hide? There are a couple of blind cats. Now we got blind cats. This is going to help us. If you thought herding cats was bad, try herding blind cats. That's God's job. And He has come to us blind cats, and He has given us the future as a warning. The biggest warning, of course, is what are you going to do with Jesus Christ? Because I need you, God says, I need you to have Him pay for your sins instead of you. So I don't want to lose you. It's a dire warning. It's a warning given out of love. But it is a warning. Part of the gospel message, of course, is a warning. You can't get to the good news unless you have the bad news, right? The gospel's the good news. You got to get, what's the bad news? The warning. Well, this is what we've got. Now, back to the book of Daniel. Here we are. Why would God reveal this? Sorry, I saw your hand. I don't want to lose this train of thought. So now we have a prophecy which is profound in its comprehension of what's going to happen yet, right? All the little blips, bits and pieces, if those blips and pieces happen before Nebuchadnezzar, then that's good, that's all fine. I mean, they don't have any impact on what we've just been revealed. But here's an important point.
anything after this, in your Bible, anything after this has to fit into this. It's not rocket science. What I'm saying is God doesn't change the future. Once He's revealed it. This is it. This is what's going to happen. So it's not going to be different in Daniel than it's going to be in Ezekiel, or different than it's going to be in Revelation, or anywhere else in your Bible or when Jesus is talking about, at the end time, those kind of talks that He had. It's all got to, listen, it all has to fit into this. It has to. It just has to. Because God already revealed, this is it. Nebuchadnezzar to the end. Boom, here we go. Everything else now that's going to be revealed has to fit into this. That's not rocket science, like I said. It's just common sense, right? The kind of common sense that God made common. Not today's common sense. I don't even go there. Al.
You asked the question, why Nebuchadnezzar?
Yes.
I think that there's a partial answer to that, in that he was the world leader, that if Israel wasn't going to be the city on a hill, then he had the position by which to make sure that this account would live after him.
I love it. Yep.
And so then he did the accounting for the story. I don't know, ever heard that he lived according to those truths.
No,
Because
Nebuchadnezzar,
he
you're
got
saying?
snapped up in other things, and by the third chapter, he's in deep doggy doo.
That's a problem. We got it.
But he had that place that God appointed for him to give an accounting of what we get to read here.
That's right. I mean, he was
And
second in
as a world
command. He
power.
was way up there, right? And in a prominent place, which of course, like I alluded to, that is the place that God wanted the nation of Israel to have. And it wasn't a low place in the whole world. It was supposed to be a high place, right? But now He has brought a single man there.
Well, it happened before that already, because God used him, or that country, to take out Israel. I mean, usually God gave Israel the power,
Right.
but here he changed sides and did that so that also that they could fulfill, be responsible for the rest of it.
Recap on the dream. Remember, it was, and I got, I'm sure if you've looked at all, there's been some. Have I got one? No, these diagrams that show you this. Yeah, there we go. This is a typical kind of one, right? The statue, right, of the dream. Of course, an artist's representation of it. But head of gold, right? Silver, body, chest, brass, midsection, iron legs, and then the iron and clay feet. And then he goes on, of course, and gives the interpretation that these are, Daniel gives to Nebuchadnezzar the prophecy interpretation. These are kingdoms. This whole thing is about kingdoms. From Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom to the end of the age kingdom, right? God's kingdom. Every other kingdom, the gold, silver, so forth, everybody's got somebody coming after. That means you don't last. And one of those other common sense things. It's just not going to last. And then the silver's not going to last. And it's not going to last. Iron's not going to last. Iron and clay is not going to last, because in the end, this rock comes and shatters and the chaff flies, and now there is a kingdom that shall never end.
Amen.
It's done. Now it's done, but there's nothing after. That means that's it. That is God's kingdom. And then we took some passages of Jesus speaking, of course, the kingdom is at hand. Right? That kind of, it's there. It's just about there. Now, so we've gone through a little bit of this. Head of gold, it represents Nebuchadnezzar. Now, by the way, actually, I'll read it this way. This was a good paragraph that I found in some of my study. The first four kingdoms, so first four gold down to the iron, right? They have been identified as Babylon, Persia, Medes and Persian, Greek, and the Roman empires. How did they do that? Because hindsight is 20/20, right? You go, oh, that's what he meant. Right? And the more hindsight you have, I mean, it's just, oh, wow, right? And they could look at the details of it, even with Alexander the Great and all this kind of stuff, and how that horn got bust off, and then these 4 other horns. You know, there's all these things that relate to from Revelation, different visions of it. So, but hindsight gives you this beautiful vision. But God didn't do it in hindsight, right? He did it in foresight. This is the big proof of God, if you would. You know, yeah, I've often said you can't, well, not often said, but you're never going to really prove God to anybody. They're going to have to do it with a choice, right? But in terms of the best proofs, right, prophecy is one of those. How do you tell from Nebuchadnezzar to the end? Well, the day he did it, everybody could have called God a liar. So who knows? I don't know. Does he get it right? We don't know. Well, then Nebuchadnezzar falls, right? Babylon falls, and you go, oh, but as soon as it happens, you're not going, the prophecy. No. There's some time that passes by, and then you're going to go, oh, I wonder if that Nebuchadnezzar, that's right. They fell in a day right there, boom, and they were taken. I wonder if that's not the silver. Right? Then the same thing happens to the Medes and Persians when Alexander the Great comes flying in out of nowhere, kind of thing, and takes them up. So we go, oh, okay, well that could have been the silver. That means, and all of a sudden it's getting clearer and clearer and clearer. What? Because of hindsight. Time has passed. You're looking back now, and now they can see it. Right? So this writer goes on and says, the identification has come from the workings of history that match prophecies. But here's the problem with that. You need history to match it. Right? This is when you're in it, you've got the worst vision of anybody looking at it. Right? God sees it, that's good. The future can look back and see it, that's good. You're in it, you can't see nothing. It looks like maybe or could be or maybe or could be. I mean, yes, no, I don't know, right? So he's going to go on. He says, Daniel already said Babylon was, so you got that one nailed, right? We got that one. It was given. Here's a given. How many you got left now? 4. Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar was always, we got the first one. There's 4 left. Well, we know the end one is what? God. We got that one, so we don't have to work. We're not in that one, right? Right? We're not in the God kingdom yet. So now we got 3. But we know it's not the Medes and Persians, right? And we're not this one, and we're not that one. So where are we? Well, we're in that clay feet thing. It's just common sense. That's all that's left. We're there. We're in the clay iron feet. There's nothing else for us. All the other ones are fulfilled. The first 3, boom, and the last one, done. So you're left with this. This is where you're at. So now again, guess who's got the worst vision of where we are and what the pieces mean? Us. Okay? So all I'm saying this for is you're not going to find a whole lot of hard and fast from me in it. As much as an acknowledgement that we can't quite see clearly. I'm going to go through and because we're using this sort of as a springboard, we're just opening up a can of worms with prophecy, right, with this one. I mean, it just did the whole comprehensive from Nebuchadnezzar to the end. We're going to move through this stuff. And we're going to have some fun looking at it.
There is a hint about the iron also, and that iron was in fact Roman. And the resurgence of a Roman Empire is distinctly on the horizon.
That's sort of one piece that's in agreement, I think, with all, for the most part. They're all in agreement with that. They waver a little bit in different places, but opinions differ on the fifth empire, the one we're in. It differs, right? Some have tried to identify it with various periods in Europe's history, right, with iron and clay, that kind of mix too. Others claim that the feet represents the divided remnants of Rome. Let's see, before being conquered by Christianity, quote unquote. Still, others believe the clay iron empire is yet to come. That is the kingdom of Antichrist with the revived Roman Empire. I think we're far as cutting straws or hairs or whatever at this point. That's my point about this fifth one. Is nobody can see it exactly clearly, and we just can't, right? So, but that doesn't mean that we're not in it. We got no other place to be. That's what we're in, kind of thing. This means that when you hear someone say there's nothing left that has to be fulfilled, that's sort of, I think, what they mean, right? The only other kingdom that's coming is the final one. There's not another one after the clay iron feet. So that's where we're at. That's why, I think accurately, Jesus could say, you know, the end times are here kind of deal. Just we're in that end deal. Now, this is where the opinions will differ. But what I'm trying to do is add some stability. Is that right, the word? I'm trying to add a good foundation for prophetic studies. Because it has to fit in this stuff. It has to fit. It has to be in one piece or the other all the way along now. It just has to be. There's not another storyline for the history of the world. This is the one that it has to fit in. So, and now he gave it Dan. Amazing. He gave it with Daniel. Wow, why? Maybe we could have done with Moses. You know, why didn't he do that come out? What wasn't his plan right there? He has changed plans along the way. And God's permitted to change plans. In fact, he needs to because of us. Thank the Lord that he doesn't. And now he's going to work out this plan. So now he's got, what is in this plan? What is it that God has in mind? He told the nation of Judah before the Babylonians came, he says, I want you to go with them. In fact, you want to live, go with them. You want to fight, you're going to die. Because I'm fighting with the Babylonians, God said. We are looking at the sovereignty of God in the world. Not just in a little Christian bubble. We're talking about God in the world. He's running the whole show when he says all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Wow. Right? All things work together. I mean, even sending the Babylonians in to take out Judah. Yes. Destroy the temple? Yes. All of that are going to work together for good. What? Just in closing now, we're going to just, I'll give you, this is what we're going to do next time. We're going to look at the different empires. And again, when I was in high school, this is when my head would have hit the floor, and they would have hit the firm big up. History class is over. But it's going to be some history for us. And that's what we're doing. The Babylonian. What's the significance of, why did God do, what did he do with them? He's going to work all things together for good. So he's going to take different nations that are going to beat each other up. And in the midst of that, he's going to use them for his ultimate purpose of getting the Messiah to the people.
And the gospel out.
What's that?
And the gospel out.
And the gospel out.
Roads.
Babylon rose from a Mesopotamian city, became powerful, city-state. First mention of Babylon comes in Genesis. Tower of Babel, that's part of the Babylon history thing. Early growth, by the time of Abraham, Babylon had become an independent city-state. And the Babylonian dynasty included, the first one did, Hammurabi. We've heard of his name, I think, in history, right? The sixth king, known for his, what?
Code.
Laws, yeah. Right? His law, yeah, the code. So he expanded the kingdom, and the area around Babylon became known then as Babylonia. During the second dynasty, Babylon was in communication with Egypt, and that's when they had this alliance and struggle against Assyria, right? We know that from Josiah's time. That was going on in there as well. So after the time of, let's see, the fourth dynasty of Babylonian kings thrived under Nebuchadnezzar. So that's where we land here. And that's where God starts his timeline. He's going to move through, right? So Babylon was only nominally independent, requiring Assyrian protection earlier, right? But they finally broke free of that. And then it says Nebuchadnezzar's conquest of Judah under the Chaldean dynasty, and arguably throughout the rest of history, no king surpassed the glory and absolute power of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Now, I alluded to the magnificence earlier, but when the historians write about it, they always end up here with Nebuchadnezzar. This was an absolute massive empire in appearance and in geography, mass area. And God took Daniel and stuck him second in command. After everybody rejected his people. God, we have to close. I can't spend more time on this because we're right at the end. But aren't you glad God's in charge of this thing? Right? I mean, the guys that think they're in charge aren't in charge. They're actually doing that blind walking thing. It's darkness kind of deal. But God's running the show. Thank the Lord. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we praise you. This is a new year for us. And we're just going to enjoy you. And we ask that you to help us to glorify you and to take that name of Christ and bring that gospel to the world, in our immediate world and the bigger world all around us. Help us to do that. Praise you for how you have revealed Scripture to us and preserved it for our good. Praise you. Bless the remainder of this morning's service in Jesus' name. Amen.